Homework part 2. Allow the editing of student names after they're already in the list. Gee, it would be nice if I could make that span's content editable. A couple ways you could do this. Actually, there's a number of ways you could do this. I saw several. I'm going to show you 2 of those ways. First, I will show you what I think is the easy way. The other way isn't particularly hard. But I'll show you the most straightforward way first. We could go to our HTML, find that span in the template, which is student name here, right? That's what we want to be able to edit. And there is an HTML5 attribute called content editable. Set that to true. Refresh the page. And suddenly I can click in here and start making changes. Refresh the page, and it's gone. But by golly, I could change it, right? So that's a step in the right direction. Just add content editable equal true. Let's go to our JavaScript and see if we can make it save. So we need a function that's going to do that for us. Let's call it update name. And then we'll make it receive the student and the event. Now let's think about what that event might be. First of all, what's it going to be an event on? What query selector do we want? We could specifically target student name. We could also just look for anything with the content editable attribute. How about we do that? Let's use an attribute selector. We've done it a couple of times, but not a lot. Just brackets, content editable. So, you could say span bracket content editable, and that would specifically find spans with the content editable attribute, or we could just do that. We could also look for a particular value, but I don't think we're going to start with any content editable false explicitly. So I'm happy with that as a selector. Now, what event shall we look for? What event did you use if you did it this way? If you used content editable? When did you save it? Yeah, Devin. Blur. So when you put your cursor inside a field, that's focusing it. When you move it back out, that's blur. Seems good? Add event listener. The event is blur. And we will call this .update name. We'll bind it and pass in the student object. And remember, that will be the first argument. The event will be the last argument. So we need to set the name of the student in the array to, let's see, what will the event target be? It'll be that span. Now the span is not an input, so value doesn't work actually, despite the fact that it looks like an input and can receive input. The value would be the text content. Now we don't need to change anything in the LI because that changes automatically. Content editable does that part for us. So we just need to make sure that the change actually persists. So we update the array this way and then simply call save to update local storage. See what happens. Refresh. Give her a last name. Now, if I just refresh now, it doesn't save because I never blurred out of the field. Now if I click somewhere else, refresh the page, it's saved. So blur means it had focus and it no longer does. So that seems to do the trick. Click out of here, refresh, still works. Move up, refresh, everything looks good. Now, let's see. That's the basic functionality. What about editing one and then hitting enter? That's what that's going to do. That's going to add new lines to it. That looks terrible. What can we do about that? Did anybody happen to address that issue? All right. So the event there that I want to change the behavior of is pressing the enter key. So let's add another event listener to our content editable. Let's make it a key press. And let's call it save on enter. And I don't think we're going to need student. So let's make save on enter. It'll receive just an event. And let's see what that looks like. Let's throw a debugger in here. Refresh. Go in here, type a key, any key. Okay, paused. Let's look. We've got our event object. It says keyboard event, key Y. Key code 121. What if I press enter? Event, key, enter, code, enter, key code 13. I think that key code is going to turn out to be a little more reliable than those other things. So I'd like to just make sure that it's really that key code. Key code is 13 for enter. So let's say if event.keycode triple equal 13, and yeah, keycode is camel cased. Then what? What should I do if they hit enter? So our event target is the name field, right? What about event.target.blur? That should trigger update name, which will do the actual saving for us. So if we just detect that they press the enter key and blur it, that should help. Refresh. Hit enter. Still puts the enter there. Did it save it? Hard to tell. Let's get rid of her name again. Enter. Refresh. Yeah, it's still there. Let's make sure. Okay. If you change it just to Nicole, hit enter, refresh. Yeah, it's saving it. I don't like that it's doing that, though. So how can we stop that from happening? Hey, yeah. What's the default action for hitting enter? It puts a new line break in. What if we prevent that? Prevent default. I'm going to do that before the blur because I want to do it right away, but only if the key code is 13, not if they press any other key. We don't want it to stop taking any input at all. So now we'll change it to Clayton, hit enter. There, we're blurred. Refresh the page. Our change took. Not bad. I want to do just a little something else. Because right now you would never know that these are editable, would you? There's nothing to indicate unless you just happen to click on one and then you see, oh, I guess I can do something to this. So what sort of clue could we give to the user? How about when you hover over one, if your mouse happens to go over an editable area, it gives us a little outline to let us know. So in our CSS, we could again target any element that has a content editable attribute by using the attribute selector, content editable. And we want only when you hover do we want to apply this style. So we will use the pseudo class hover. Let's look at that IntelliSense. Applies while the user designates an element with a pointing device, but does not necessarily activate it. For example, a visual user agent, that means a graphical browser, could apply this pseudo class when the cursor hovers over a box generated by the element. That seems like what we want. So what will we do? Well, let's see what the rule is for this thing. Now that little outline we're getting is specific to Chrome. But for right now, we could just mimic that. So notice I can't see what styles are applied when this thing is actually focused, because as soon as I look down in my styles here, the focus goes away. So that's where this comes in handy. Toggle element state. Now I can make it force one of these other states, and I want to see what it looks like when it's focused, because it's when it's focused that this shows up. Now let's see. Here are all the style sheets that are applied. If I go down far enough, I see stuff that is applied by the user agent itself, by the browser. It's a built-in style. It shows those in gray. Notice user agent style sheet. And it says focus, outline, WebKit, focus ring, color, auto, 5 pixels. Expand that out and we can see that that's the combination of 3 styles: outline color, outline style, and outline width. Let's copy this real quick into our style sheet so we can play with that. So outline color, it's using a WebKit specific named color. WebKit focus ring color. We could do that. I assume it'll default to something else in other browsers. Making it 5 pixels when you hover seems like a bit much. That'll make it look like you can already type in it, but you can't until you click still. So let's just change that to 2 pixels, but otherwise keep the rule the same. Refresh the page. See how that looks. Yeah. That's not so bad. Notice though that then when I click, it doesn't turn back to 5 pixels. It's still kind of thin. It's because I'm still hovering over it. If I move my mouse away, then it gets fat again. So I would prefer that once it's focused, the focus rule takes precedence over my hover rule. But a user-defined style sheet's always going to be more than the is always going to take precedence over the built-in styles. So I need an additional rule for anything with a content editable attribute that is focused. There's a focus pseudo class, much like the hover pseudo class. And I'll just change the outline width back to 5 pixels. So now refresh the page. When I hover over one of them, it's a thin outline. When I click in it, it goes back to the default thick outline. Now that seems okay. I can make changes, hit enter, and I'm still hovering over it, so I still got the thin outline. But it should have saved. It did. Life is grand. Make sense? Now here's something I've never actually talked about. Somehow I've kept forgetting to mention this. Why does this work? I pass in the student, I make a change to it, and it's actually changed in the array, not just here within this function. Have you noticed that? We've done this several times. You can just change that thing, and it actually updates the array. Is that surprising when you actually stop and think about it? It wouldn't work this way in a lot of languages. It's because objects are always passed around by reference in JavaScript, not by value. So this isn't a copy of the student that's in the array. It's the exact same object because we never made a copy of it. So right now, that's actually very useful, but that could have side effects as well if you're not expecting it. So one of these days we will work on something where that's a side effect and we don't want it, and we'll have to make a copy of an object. But right now, that works because it is passed by reference, not value. Worth a commit for sure. We can do it from right inside code, of course. Edit existing student names.